Good day, lovelies. I'm always thinking the angles and everything, and I can't really always explain everything in one video either. But going back on the gray that I give, that I allow, at least mentally for myself, and for others, is the Matt Gates example. Now there was, I'm sure tons of other examples prior to Matt Gates, but this is a perfect example. Someone that's almost an adult getting a fake ID because they want to entrap or blackmail, said target, right? But then you look at that situation and not everybody's crucifying him, although some were trying, and I'll get to that in a sec. But, for the most part, everybody's like, oh, there was a spy family connected with the military or FBI or CIA, and they had a daughter that they used, for sex, and they're doing all the sexual shit behind the scenes, and then, she passes herself off as some 19-year-old, just barely legal or whatever the fuck, but people look at that and they're not crucifying him because they're like, well, it was all consensual. And I'm like, I know, why don't you just take that standard, right, for the middle area between childhood and adulthood, and people would be like, oh my god. And well, see, a lot of them are demons, though. Is that was the Matt Gates thing was kind of revealing to me, at least. Like, I see shit, and there's a bunch of the demons that are already doing the underage sex stuff, and they're like, oh my god, could you believe Matt Gates? Right, and then it gets very convincing because they always wear that mask and two-face like that, right? And I'm just like, why even play the game, to begin with, right? Because the thing is, though, is some great many people, they take it to the crazy extremes where now suddenly a 16-year-old and 19-year-old getting together and they need charges and blah blah blah, or at least one of them does, and it's just a bunch of negativity shit, I'm sure with your digital images too, with young folks with all these fucking devices and everything, and then they start sending stuff to themselves, and then oh my god, and then they're just going to selectively, they're just going to make, just like the How to Catch a Predator thing is, like, Chris Hansen might have had good intentions, but he was being steered to, like, look, you're only going to get the peasants to fight amongst the peasants, all right? The moment you start going for the power structure, the ones creating all these problems, to begin with, it's over, and that's exactly what they did. And so I don't agree with the whole, a lot of that shit could have been headed off at the pass, and you could have just told them online, and you have enough harassment and stalking laws really to enforce if no wasn't enough. Like, you could teach your kids to say no. And then, in other videos of mine, I'm like, why don't you guys just make a decoy robot that looks young, right? And they're like, no, we'd rather dress our children's like sluts and get them to go around, whether we're on the underage fucking side or on the fucking, entrapment protection side. And it's like, so you want to, take like a decoy that's made out of metal and silicone or whatever, and, so you're not using an actual child. And it's like, looks really convincing too, right? And you just have them hang out at the playground while you're alone, right? Maybe late at night because you're trying to lure someone in, and you could have your decoy there, just very convincing, could make responses that are realistic, and people be like, in my past, not, not constantly, but in my past, they're like, how dare you would suggest that? It's like, yeah, but wouldn't that save a child's life? I know it kind of sounds fucked up, but really, if you just get a bunch of material and make something that looks like a child or a teenager, and then use that for bait, but there'd also be the perverse thing, and they're like, look, we got our digital sex robots, a brothel, shit will come out probably, right? And they're like, look, we got our adults, we got our teenagers, and we got the, children. And it's like, but for the ones that you're really trying to find, like the predators, like it's about taking innocence, so that wouldn't satisfy them. But what it would do is all your sexual erring adults that you guys like fighting amongst yourselves, even though you're all sexually abused and you're all just being tricked to just fight amongst themselves, right? It would take those ones and kind of, because they're not like looking to violate, like innocence and everything. They just kind of see sexual things as kind of more casual than, we maybe that was like, part of the manipulation of all things being distorted. Everything has been distorted and twisted a bit. Maybe just kind of like leaving it up to the families and the participants into what the fuck they want to do. And it is as simple as that. But no long-term stuff, right? You definitely okay, like, you better not get her pregnant, or you better not get pregnant under my roof. You better be wearing, get them some condoms and shit, right? And just kind of like, educate them, and then no sex changes, right? Because that's a long-term thing. All right, until you're 18, and you're still going to look like a hot trans anyway. So what the fuck? You don't need to change yourself, prior to that. So I just kind of, see things a little differently, and it actually seems, like more freedom. I'm hating less, and I see more peace, and it's like, I haven't really heard an argument against this stuff, but nobody is really trying. But anyway, so, as unconventional as my thinking is, I think it is right. And I think people mean well, but they get tricked into, these, fighting amongst yourselves shit. And then when you're going after the problem, then they're like, oh, well, we got to cancel Chris Hansen now. It was nice that it'd be nice if Chris Hansen could actually, we did a series, and we, explored all these sewers and all these tunnels and shit, and maybe we found some people and helped them out, or maybe we didn't. We had some specialized sonar equipment too, or stuff that could maybe detect or hear humans, like shit like that. Because the dude has resources, right? And if you're actually trying to help children, then, it might be illegal to go underneath in the sewers, but if somebody's kidnapped and held there illegally, maybe by the law itself and the government itself, then you would be still obligated to, self-defend that person, with reasonable means. And I think we do have reasonable means, even though they're going to gaslight and they're going to be like, look, you're crazy. You're just crazy. You're just wackaloo. Do. All right, but yeah, for the people actually trying to like, solve problems and shit, I still think you could sonar the ground underneath that fucking pizza shop that was like, the subject of Pizzagate. And then they got one of their MK Ultras, or maybe just like one of their little actor folks that, knowingly or maybe unknowingly went in there and shot the place. Yeah, it just so magically happened to hit the hard drive with all the, material that everyone, is, talking about. And that's another thing with the whole fucking AI shit. It's like, yeah, there's like no laws like regulating AI, that yet they're going to use it to make a bunch of, generated child porn. And so they're just going to create a problem. No, you can't ever solve that problem like the AI thing printing that up, right? It's only going to be like passed amongst you folks and everything, and then you guys, well, you're in group B over here, all right? And then, they're the bad ones in group A over there, and da-da-da-da-da. Like forever problem. That doesn't sound productive at all. And it's like a trap, and it's like an illusion of like, progress. And a lot of their demons, they're like, yeah, let's do that. Let's get the ones with the data and everything. They're like that. Like with Matt Gaetz, they're like, oh my God, could you believe he was with an underager that totally convinced him and others around him that they were of age? Right? And it's like, so use the Matt Gaetz standard when you're talking about these things. That was all totally consensual, and they're trying to get others to violate the law or make it look like that or whatnot, right? That was just an all consensual situation, and I saw the people did react kind of in that fashion, with a few of their demons coming out, being like, "Oh my God," because that's what they're supposed to do, and that's how the manipulation works. Master manipulators, narcissists, the demonic type, right? Duh. And all you could really do is just be self-aware of it. Just like people thinking they're going to go to Hollywood with a gasoline can and a lighter, and Hollywood has all those spy connections, and they're going to know you're coming with fucking gasoline and lighter, and that's not the way that you kill Hollywood. The way that you kill Hollywood is just you stop giving it your energy, right? Maybe stick to the old movies that you fucking grew up on, and maybe try unplugging more from electronics, like I'm, doing, and other people are doing and struggling with. But some more succeeding than others, or some more successful than others. So yeah. Anyway, I wanted to rant about that a little bit more because I don't always talk about all the angles and everything, and I think that was a really good one. The Matt Gaetz standard, because that's kind of like, I look at the Matt Gaetz situation and I'm like, yeah, that was just, everyone was consenting there. Some people were trying to, do some legal nonsense from the spy people, of course, right? And they have millions of children, all right? Like, people think this is some small, like, oh, it's a little thing here and there. It's everywhere. It's just like literally everywhere. And then you're like going to be like participating in it or choosing not to participate in it, but you're going to be self-aware of it. Like, your teenage daughter or whatever running off to a party, you got to probably talk about some sexual things and some situations that may come up, because if you don't arm her for that, she's just going to be so shocked, and then she's going to be like, she's going to get on her knees and her mouth is going to drop. And some parents are like, good, we trained our daughter to be like that, and other parents are going to be like, no. And I think just both of those are okay there. And just leave it up to the families, and then have less problems, because I see the light side is being forced to do a whole bunch of shit, especially when they're over 18, which it's like, kind of just shove it in your face and everything, and just. And anyway, so I was thinking maybe try, loosening up on all these made up problems, so then you could focus on like the source and bigger fish of the problems. Or not, or not, do that, or not, I don't know. All right, it's like up to you, to figure out and decide. So I'm just an informant. All right, you guys have a good fucking day. Peace.